السادة الحضور، برجاء الالتزام بالمقاعد، ستبدأ الجلسة الآن. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. The session will begin now. السادة الحضور، برجاء الالتزام بالمقاعد، ستبدأ الجلسة الآن. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. The session will begin now. السيد الرئيس عبد الفتاح السيسي
His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, President of Arab Republic of Egypt.
The President of the Arab Republic of Egypt.
السيد الرئيس عبد الفتاح السيسي رئيس
Your Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, dear attendees, I wish to welcome you all in this plenary on the international responsibility for post-conflict areas reconstruction. I tell you no secret, and I do not exaggerate if I say that the suffering of millions of people throughout the globe due to the wars, conflicts, and hardships is extremely excruciating. I tell no secret as well that economies, even the great economies and medical systems, even in wealthy countries, are suffering due to the severe hits by the pandemic of corona, let alone millions of innocents, of refugees and internally displaced people who are facing the virus face to face. COVID is harvesting lives every day. I will refer you to the estimates of Oxfam on the number of daily casualties due to the COVID-related hunger. 12,000 deaths every day. Millions are expecting, unfortunately, the same destiny unless the international community takes immediate actions. Save the Children as well, who are present here in this forum. They referred as well that numbers of IDPs and refugees around the world are estimated to be 82 million persons, including 35 million children who are tagged as refugees or displaced. Plenty of aspects of suffering in the world due to the conflicts and wars, and I will give you a single example. What is happening in Gaza that has been under airstrikes last May targeted the already deteriorated infrastructure and targeted as well number of medical facilities, including the main hospital that provides the services for testing and treatment of COVID in Gaza Strip, which required immediate action from Egypt on humanitarian and social levels, providing allocation of $50 million for the reconstruction of Gaza in the second phase of the reconstruction plan. According to the World Bank and United Nations agencies' estimates, the cost of Libya reconstruction could sum up to $110 billion. The estimates of the Arab League for the reconstruction of Syria could sum up to $900 billion, while in Gaza Strip it could be up to $20 billion. A huge amount of money that cannot be provided by the international community. To find out immediate solutions for the previously mentioned crises, I wish to welcome the attendees. I wish to welcome Mrs. Sahara Lijbouri, the Director of UNRWA in Egypt, I wish as well to welcome Mrs. Grazia Laritza, the First Advisor of Human Rights and Governance in the European EU delegation in Egypt. I wish to welcome His Excellency Ahmed Abdel Latif, Ambassador Ahmed Abdel Latif, the Director of Cairo Center for Conflict Settlements, Peacekeeping and Saving. I wish to welcome as well our dear guest, Ambassador Tariq Al-Nu'mani, the Ambassador of Yemeni youth in the Arab African Council for Integration and Development. I wish also to virtually welcome Mrs. Leslie Reid, the Director of USAID in Egypt. I wish to welcome as well Mrs. Susan Mikhail, the UN Women Head of Office. I invite you now to watch this short film that provides a glimpse on the suffering of millions of refugees and IDPs in areas of conflict around the world, and how important it is to immediately start to take an action to reconstruct the conflict areas.
خسائر في الأرواح.
Life losses,
لم تتوقف بعد.
non-stop injuries and infections that would destroy the world systems of healthcare.
ماذا عن حجم الخسائر التي تخلفها الوتيرة المتسارعة للصراعات المسلحة في عالمنا اليوم، بزيادة في أعداد اللاجئين والمهاجرين جبريا تصل إلى 82 مليون شخص، وبلغ عدد المعرضين لخطر المجاعة بسبب احتدام الصراع 100 مليون شخص، بالإضافة للتضرر الشامل لسكان مناطق تلك الصراعات.
كم مليون ماتوا في أفغانستان؟ كم مليون ماتوا في العراق؟ كم مليون ماتوا في سوريا وليبيا والدول التانية؟ مين يدفع الثمن ده؟
أليست هذه الأرقام الهائلة والأعلى في التاريخ أشبه بجائحة تصل حد المأساة الإنسانية؟ نحن اليوم أمام 235 مليون شخص يحتاجون إلى مساعدات إنسانية في العالم، والتعثر في إنهاء الصراعات يجعلهم أمام مصير مجهول.
يا ترى الطفل أو الطفلة اللي قعدت 9 سنين في معسكر لاجئين ده هتطلع شخصيتها عاملة إيه؟
وأمام هذه التغيرات المعاصرة والصراعات المتلاحقة، بات تطور مفهوم إعادة الإعمار أمراً حتمياً، ضرورة أدركتها الدولة المصرية من منطلق واجبها الإنساني كجزء لا يتجزأ من أمنها القومي، وهو ما نراه جلياً في حضور مصر الفعال في القضايا العربية والإفريقية بدبلوماسية تنموية تستعيد بها موازين القوى في مناطق صراعات بات بها الدمار مألوفاً، وآخرها في قطاع غزة، وذلك بعد الدور الرئيسي الذي لعبته مصر في التوسط بين الفصائل الفلسطينية وإسرائيل لوقف إطلاق النار في مايو 2021، ومن ثم إعلان الرئيس عبد الفتاح السيسي بتخصيص 500 مليون دولار كمبادرة مصرية لصالح الإعمار في قطاع غزة، مع إتاحة الفرصة للشركات الفلسطينية المحلية جنباً إلى جنب مع الشركات المصرية المتخصصة للمشاركة في تنفيذ عملية إعادة الإعمار والإسهام في إزالة الأنقاض وركام المنازل المهدمة وتخفيف العبء عن الفلسطينيين وعودة الحياة إلى طبيعتها. وحتى الآن ما تم من المرحلة الأولى هو إزالة ورفع أكثر من 85 ألف متر مكعب من الركام خلال 65 يوما، وبدء أعمال المرحلة الثانية بتطوير الواجهة البحرية لكورنيش شمال غزة. وتبقى المرحلة الأهم، ألا وهي تعزيز الاستدامة بما يمنع عودة الصراع مرة أخرى. إن التحديات الجديدة التي تواجهها عمليات إعادة الإعمار في العالم بعد جائحة صحية ممتدة وتغيرات مناخية تنذر بأن أسوأ الأزمات لم يأتي بعد، وسط صراعات متصاعدة داخليا وخارجيا خلفت وراءها اقتصادات هشة وبنية أساسية مدمرة، مما يستدعي مزيدا من دعم المجتمع الدولي لعمليات الإعمار في المناطق المتضررة من الصراعات. التضافر والمشاركة بين كافة المنظمات والهيئات والشركات الدولية الفعالة متعددة الجنسيات، فلم يعد هناك متسع من الوقت أو الإمكانيات المادية لتحمل تكلفة تدوير الصراعات مرة أخرى، لكن يظل الأمل موجوداً.
It is time to put armed conflict on lockdown and focus together on the true fight of our lives.
اسمحوا لنا أن نبدأ أولاً.
Allow us to start with the humanitarian situation in Yemen. I wish to welcome with the first of the speakers, Ambassador Tariq Hamoud al-Naamani, the Ambassador of Yemeni Youth in the Arab African Council for Integration and Development. Engineer Tariq, welcome. Please describe the image, how the situation is going on now in Yemen and how immediate is reconstruction needed to be carried out. At the outset, I wish to extend my sincere thanks to the Arab Republic of Egypt people, government and leadership for the hospitality and the impressive organization of this forum, as well as paving the way for the union of people on peace in the city of peace. I'm here from the land of history and civilization, Yemen that has been called the happy Yemen, Yemen al-Sa'id. 7 years now, we are no more happy. 4,000 schools have been closed. 4 million children have no chance to access education. 3.1 million children suffering malnutrition. Everything that is beautiful in Yemen has been destroyed. Productivity stopped. The IDPs are almost 4 million IDPs. We are suffering the worst ever health and social conditions in Yemen. Yemeni crisis has been named as the worst ever around the world. 377,000 million citizens, 60% out of which are direct result of the conflict, malnutrition, diseases, poverty as well. A large portion of the lost are children. Every 9 minutes, a Yemeni child dies, which means that after finishing this session, 10 children would have lost their lives. 60%. That is expected to increase to 75% by the year 2030. Yemen lost $126 billion of our GDP. 20 million citizens are below poverty line. Half of the Yemeni population, the per capita is $1.9 per day. 8.6 million suffering malnutrition in Yemen. This is according to the UNDP report. In 2030, UN estimates that's to be up to 3.1 million people, 96 of which shall be result of non-conflict reasons. 223,000 have died throughout 7 years due to non-conflict reasons like malnutrition, poverty, and starving. This takes place due to all the immediate humanitarian assistance provided. Do you believe that there is an issue with the distribution of the relief assistance? Yes. Should you read the amount of relief assistance received by Yemen? It could be 25 million US dollars. As the report indicates, we need 30 billion US dollars. Only 25 million have been received. Where are the money? Where does it go? Nobody knows. We have been told that 40% are allocated for the payroll and employment. We see nothing on the ground. We have received expired drugs and commodities. We believe that the UN role and the international community role in Yemen need to be enhanced and accelerated, especially the development reconstruction. Most of the institutions say that we are waiting for the war to stop and then we will start the reconstruction. What do you think? Do you think that the humanitarian and relief actions shall remain the same, or do you think that we need to start comprehensive reconstruction which shall collapse due to the ongoing war? Now we have 22 governorates. Not all of them are undergoing war. We can find zones and areas that are away from conflict and are not part of the war, and we can start reconstruction there. We can have model governorates where they enjoy education, health, and stable life. We have 5 million IDPs. If we can place development in the non-conflict areas, most of the Yemenis shall direct themselves towards these cities. Coordination between governmental and non-governmental organization when it comes to the mechanism of the redistribution of the relief. What do you think of this? We need transparency. Why do we have this vacuum? The vacuum takes place because the external actors are manipulating our countries, turning it into a proxy conflict. Proxy wars, Yemen, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, all are proxy conflicts. And the external actors are manipulating the situation. We are being used. Now we call for Egypt to play a middling role, because all actors have the same stance from Egypt. So we are calling for Egypt to immediately intervene. Who is paying the biggest price for this conflict? Youth and children. Youth and children. Youth have their dreams ending. Universities closed. Children are out of schools. 3 million children are suffering malnutrition. More than 100,000 children have died due to the starvation. Do you have recommendations? I wish to call for His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. I'm calling upon the feeling of parenthood that you feel towards the Yemeni youth and the Yemeni people undergoing conflicts, to call for them for training courses in the National Academy for Training. That youth have lost all the opportunities for training and education. So when it comes to reconstruction, I wish that Egypt will play its role. What we are seeing and witnessing in Egypt at the level of development, it is impressive actually. Egypt and Yemen share the same responsibility and the same national security. So we wish President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, with his parental feelings, to pay special attention to the youth undergoing this conflict, to support them, to provide for them educational and training opportunities so they can be the nucleus for their state in the post-conflict. Thank you. Thank you very much. Engineer Tariq Hamoud al-Nu'mani, the ambassador of the youth of Yemen in the African Arab Council for Integration and Development. Mrs. Sahar Al-Jbouri, the Director of UNRWA Office in Egypt. Mrs. Sahar, good afternoon.
The picture in Yemen is very harsh and severe. I would like you to shed light on the status of Palestinian refugees in diaspora in different areas and countries of the world. And what are you doing? Thank you so much. I would like to express my honor for being sitting before His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, and my personal thanks for supporting the agency, the first Egyptian president calling to finance the agency in the General Assembly of the United Nations. All our sincere thanks and appreciation. You are sitting about situations in Gaza, and a short video, in fact, that was played, in fact, says a lot. But the agency is responsible for Palestinian refugees in 5 operational places: Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan, and the West Bank, besides Eastern Jerusalem. The situations in all these places is really unpleasant. The long war in Syria, the economic deterioration in Lebanon due to the lack of mobility and movement, the occupation and the new settlements being built. In fact, we have numerous of tragedy and tragic situation in Palestine. Even in Jordan, their situation became more difficult during the pandemic, and this in fact increased social and economic pressures in these places. In fact, suffered as the rest of the world due to the pandemic. Due to these pressures and the number of Palestinian refugees registered in the agency, they are around 5.8 million refugees, and also the increase of the fragility, and also the increasing their needs, and they are depending more on the agency. And we are facing major challenges. Since 2015, there are a lot of pressures on the shoulders of the agency, represented in financial pressures. It was established as a temporary agency in order to reach to a fair solution for the Israeli-Palestinian struggle and to find solutions for Palestinian refugees. After 72 years of work, we still did not reach to this solution. The reason behind that the donors refrain in fact to provide money so that the agency will play its role to provide humanitarian assistances and protecting the rights of the Palestinian refugees. This in fact represents more pressure on the shoulder of the agency, since it was forced to reconsider its services. Besides, the agency is being subjected to a very severe political lobbying from the lobbying groups in order to be liquidated and to end the issue of Palestinian refugees. Let me praise the role and commend the role played by Egypt in supporting the agency in all international events. As for the financial challenges, the agency is in dire need for sustainable funding, and we can predict that, and we cannot reach, and the agency will not be able to continue its work without having this funding. And we depend on the Egyptian role in continuing, in fact, calling upon the international community to support the agency. And what is the initiative of the Egyptian initiative for reconstruction regarding infrastructure and in Gaza and to be reconstructed? So do you think that there is a proposed form of collaboration between UNRWA and Egypt and to coordinate on ground for the needs of the agency? In fact, this Egyptian initiative came as a light of hope. The pivotal Egyptian role stopping war and opening Rafah passage for entering humanitarian assistance and treating the injured beside helping the agency. This was a light of hope for Palestinian refugees. As for reconstruction, in fact, created happiness in the hearts of people as it opened job opportunities, provided money for the people. It was this light of hope at the end of the tunnel. And of course, we would like to exploit the presence of Excellency, the President. We can, for example, expand the schools of UNRWA. We have a deficit in the classrooms due to the deficit in funding, so we had to increase number of students inside the school, so the classrooms became intensive. We need to open more classes. Education is of significant importance, as this is the only hope under siege, under wars. This will be the only hope for the children in order to reduce extremism. This is one of the things that the Egyptian government can provide us with, and also to employ Palestinian refugees. In fact, unemployment 50% among girls and 70% among boys. And if we, in fact, we can employ them in the projects of reconstruction, and we can facilitate the search for these people who are seeking jobs and work. I think that this is something that Egypt can provide us with. Thank you, Mr. Sahar Jouri, the representative of UNRWA in Cairo. And now our virtual speaker, Mrs. Suzanne Mikhail, the regional director for the United Nations Gender Equality, and also United Nations for Women. We welcome you in this session, and I would like to ask you, as being responsible for gender equality, do you think that there is equality between the gender in suffering in the conflict places, or still women are bearing the biggest suffering?
Sisi, President of Arab Republic of Egypt, distinguished guests, fellow panelists, young people, and dear audience. It is a great honor for me to be with you here today, albeit virtually. Virtually, of course, because of a number of COVID cases in the immediate family, and also I myself recovering from a cold. But it's a pleasure to be with you at the World Youth Forum on its timely theme, Building Back Together. And special thanks, of course, to the government of Egypt for organizing this important forum, but also for the continuous support for women's rights, not only in the country of Egypt, but also with its normative effects throughout the region. Your question is very valid. How does humanitarian crises or wars affect women and girls in specific ways? Let me start by saying, and take us all back, just 50 or 100 years back, when wars were conducted in a very different way. As we know, wars were conducted at battlegrounds in non-inhabited areas. Of course, at this time, civilians were usually quite protected from the effects of war. But starting off from mid-last century, as we all know, armed conflict, complex emergencies moved right into cities and villages, hence the protection of civilians were no longer the case. And all were affected. And let me say this with emphasis, despite being regional director for UN Women. Every single civilian, woman, man, child, boy, girls are affected by humanitarian crises, but in different ways. For example, women, we have seen, and this is evidence from war zones from all over the world, but also in our own region, such as Syria, such as Iraq, such as Libya, women are affected in very particular ways, such as affected to gender-based violence, different forms of slavery. As we know right now, rape is a warfare, a formal warfare. But also others are affected, of course. Children are particularly affected when it comes to mass recruitment, child soldiers, but also, as we can see today, schools and health facilities where we have both children and women are not protected as they were in previous years.
هل لديك أي
There
مقترحات
is another issue that I would
فيما
like
يتعلق
to raise
بتحقيق
here today, which I
الإعمار
think is
الإنساني الشامل لحقوق المرأة في مناطق نزاعات
There's another
السيدة
issue that
ميكايل؟
I would like to raise today with you all.
The children, do you have any proposals for the protection of
that what we have seen in the very previous years is that wars, particularly as my colleague from Yemen was saying earlier, have become more extended. So an acute humanitarian crisis tend to extend to 10 or 15 or even 20 years. And this is what we call protracted crisis. The main problem with this situation and scenario is that throughout these many years of ongoing conflict, usually the sole modality of helping a country or certain geographical areas is through humanitarian aid. And humanitarian aid is a strong and powerful tool because it has a life-saving mandate. But the challenge in front of
يبدو أننا فقدنا الاتصال بالسيدة
is
سوزان.
not enough. And I agree
أعادت
with
السيدة
my
سوزان.
colleague from Yemen that a speedy transition to recovery and reconstruction is therefore needed, particularly by defining specific geographical areas where there is some sort of stability. And one could show those areas as good practices for stabilization efforts. I'm going to pause here for a second, and I'm sure there are questions at the end.
شكرا جزيلا لوجودك معنا السيدة سوزان ميكايل المديرة
Mrs. Suzanne Mikhail, the Regional Director of the United Nations Gender Equality and also UN Women. Now I will go towards Mr. Graziella Rizza, the first consultant for human rights and civil society in the European Union. Mrs. Graziella, I would like to welcome you. And my question, after all what you have heard from the previous speakers, Engineer Tariq, Mrs. Sahar, and also the last speaker, Suzanne Mikhail, the women status. Do you think we can achieve reconstruction, and could it be sustainable in these places of conflict and the status of women that we have just heard about?
Sorry. First of all, I would like to express the gratitude on behalf of the European Union to be here in this panel. I would like to express appreciation for His Excellency Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, for the organizers, and for the participants. What we are discussing today and what we have been hearing not only in this session, but also in the past days, we are speaking about a decade that has been marked by a challenging environment for peace and stability. This has basically having effects on protracted conflicts and in several areas of our planet. We have heard the testimony about, which means what? That the threatening landscape is evolving fast and security challenges continue to emerge. They are tackling different aspects. In the video that you have shown, we have seen COVID. But we have threatened multipliers. And I think that yesterday, in several interventions, there was a good linkages on the effects that basically those aspects can have, if you don't have water, how this follows in the electricity, how this can fall then in the life of the people. What does this mean? That we really need to have an encompassing approach to foster a culture of peace. When we see here, we spoke about charm in many occurrences in those past days as the land of peace. Why? Because we need to set common values, attitude, traditions, and model of behaviors. The EU has been having an encompassing approach. I will not go into the details because all of this data is public, but I would just like to mention that in 2016, the EU has applied a global strategy for foreign and security policy. We have a European consensus on development, which means what? We are not alone. We need to be implementing and addressing these matters in partnership.
ما الذي يعيق هذه الاستراتيجيات؟
In this case,
What will hinder this strategy?
Sorry, we are speaking about the support to the UN 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development. We are speaking about the Paris Agreement on climate change, the Addis Ababa Action Agenda. In those days, we have been hearing about the forthcoming COP27. And last but not least, a gender-responsive and transformative approach. And there I would like to link to the intervention that was made by my colleague from UN Women, whereby in the EU we have developed recently a third generation of the EU Action Plan. Why so? Because we need to have an integrated approach to conflict and crisis. Last but not least, I would like to recall also the EU Pact on Migration. All of these elements are leading to displacements. And there, as I am based in Egypt, I would also like to refer to the current and recent visits of our commissioners, whereby the efforts of Egypt in managing migration have been lauded, especially taking into consideration the effort exerted in hosting 6 million of migrants and more than about 300,000 refugees. There is an important concept that has been raised today, and the EU has shaped it in what we call humanitarian development peace nexus. Your question is, can we focus purely on humanitarian aid? No, we need to have a developmental approach. This developmental approach has to pass also through the support, and we heard that in the previous sessions yesterday, of private-public partnerships. That is why the EU has joined forces with the European Investment Bank, the European Bank for Reconstruction.
Even when the conflicts are on the grill?
Well, there has been quite a number of discussions, and I would like to refer to the discussions that occurred and that are still ongoing in the framework of the Migration Pact and the Refugee Pact. And there was an important factor that was tabled at the time, and I believe that this is still of relevance, which means the de-risking factor. So we need to join forces. We cannot expect that only the grants approach will be solving the whole issues, but there is an important dimension, which is the political dimension. And there I would like to address another key word, and I think that we have been having cases of good practices, which means preventive diplomacy. Preventive diplomacy, and I think that what Egypt has been praised in several occasions today, is a key tool for conflict prevention and resolution. We should not be short-sighted and intervene only when things are happening. And on that, the EU has been playing an important role. I would like, when I reached to Sharm, I saw a very big panel showing the EU, the League of Arab States summit that occurred in 2019, co-chaired by His Excellency Abdel Fattah Sisi, and at the time our European Council presidency, Donald Tusk. It was an important moment. In that forum, there were important aspects that were discussed. And I think that it is important to continue this kind of dialogue. Let me just give you just a few last examples. The EU has been active with the UN and the US and the Russian Federation in 2002 as a member of the Quartet, where a roadmap for peace was launched. We have been active also in Yemen, in Gaza. We have joined in 2000, there was a reference of May last year, and basically there was an EU response by putting about 32 million last year for Gaza. We have joined synergy with UNRWA in order to address, this situation. We have been also responding to the Yemeni crisis with about, in only last year, 24 million. And I mean, we have different instruments that we have set up for these purposes, for which I would not like to go into the detail. I would like to conclude by saying that this is a World Youth Forum. And what are the recommendations on takeaways? And I would like to refer to the European Youth Forum paper that was issued in in November 2020. There were 5 recommendations that towards a more peaceful society: youth participation, human rights, social cohesion, climate justice and education. And I think that it is of utmost importance to involve the youth. As it was said yesterday, we need to work with the youth for the future and build together a better world.
شكرا جزيلا السيدة غراتزيلا ريتسا مستشار رئيس قسم حقوق الإنسان.
Thank you so much, Ms. Grazzella, from the EU. And now I move virtually to Ms. Leslie Reid, the USAID Mission Director for Egypt. Ms. Reid, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
أهلا بك. سيدة ريد، إلى أي مدى نجحت المؤسسات الدولية ومن بينها USAID تقديم عمليات إعادة إعمار عاجلة في مناطق النزاعات وخصوصا في الشرق الأوسط؟
Quick reconstruction works, especially in the Middle East.
Thank you so much for the question and for the chance to participate in this panel, especially in the presence of His Excellency President Al-Sisi. First, let me please recognize that for people in this audience, this is a very personal question for many. Certainly for some of the people on the panel, this is not merely academic. If you were a survivor of violence or a witness of violence, you know a lot more about this topic than I do. But for those of you who haven't experienced it personally, I thought I would share a little bit of my own experiences gained from working around the world, as well as sharing a little bit about what USAID, what we think we are learning about this topic. So as we've heard from other panelists, the challenges around this are far-reaching. First, the number, the scope, and the complexity of crisis events around the world has simply ballooned. Man-made disasters and conflict-driven events now outpace natural disasters in creating humanitarian crises, and this is even in an era of climate change and extreme weather events. When the size or scope of a disaster requires it, USAID sends out a disaster assistance response team, or a DART, that is composed of elite humanitarian staff, and they go to crisis-affected areas to coordinate the response. You know, as about 10 years ago, the most DARTs that we had in the world at any given time was about 5. But now that's just the baseline. We are responding to more crises now than we ever have before. And the severity, as we've heard from other speakers on the panel, is truly unprecedented. So we think that to deliver a successful response, we first have to understand the conflict dynamics at work. Experience tells us that imbalances drive instability, which in turn give rise to conflict. Researchers who map conflicts across sub-Saharan Africa and the MENA region predict that violent armed conflict will continue to occur in poor countries that are characterized by weak governance and high levels of political and social exclusion, in countries with previous experience with conflict, and places with widespread youth unemployment and exclusion. Another important variable is the spillover effect that happens when a country is surrounded by countries or in conflict, or sometimes what we refer to as being in a very bad neighborhood. So post-conflict responses have to address these imbalances if they're going to be successful. So while we have to meet the life-saving needs like food and water and shelter, we also have a responsibility to understand and address the root causes of those needs. Otherwise, the cycle of conflict and suffering just repeats itself. The United States is the largest bilateral humanitarian donor in the whole world. In 2021, the US government, through USAID, responded to 82 crises in 68 countries. So that's just last year. We provided $8 billion to help people affected by disasters and conflict, deliver emergency food assistance to refugees, and to give communities the tools they need to be resilient to future crises. Now, as impressive as that number might sound, globally, the UN humanitarian appeals totaled over $37.5 billion in 2021. And as we've heard from others on the panel, the needs are far outstripping the available resources. So with resources being scarce, we have to make sure that we're getting the greatest impact possible from the resources we have.
سيدة ريد المتحدث من اليمن السيد طارق ذكر
Ms. Reid, our Yemeni speaker mentioned that there is a lack of that the people really in need don't have real access to the aid offered by international organizations, and there is a lack of transparency. So what are the procedures undertaken by USAID in order to make sure that all these aid resources do reach the people who really need them?
Right. I think, at USAID, we're really trying to change the way we do business. We're trying to make it more locally owned and operated. We have a new administrator, and she set a target for us that by the end of this decade, 25% of our resources will go directly to local partners, and 50% of our programming will place communities in the lead, either as co-designers, as implementers, and as evaluators of our programs. And so really for you who are in the audience, if you're in an affected community or disaster-stricken country, we expect you to be able to play a very important role as either advocates or as implementers. We think that inclusive development and the importance of improved governance, peace building and reconciliation is critical. And we think I think Graziella said, we really have to understand how trauma affects different groups and respond accordingly.
هل تعتقدي أنه يمكن الآن بناء إعادة إعمار مستدامة؟
Do you think that there is a possibility for sustainable reconstruction for conflict areas in the Middle East, especially in light of the pandemic as well as the continuing conflict there?
Well, I think, I think we need to get at these root causes, right? And I just mentioned trauma. I know Graziella did. I think it's really imperative that we get at the human elements of reconstruction in addition to the physical infrastructure. Otherwise, I think we're doomed to repeat conflict, because we know that conflict causes trauma, and trauma begets more conflict, and we really kind of need to break that chain.
أشكرك شكرا جزيلا السيدة ليز ريد مديرة
Thank you so much, Ms. Reid. USAID Mission Director for Egypt. Now I give the floor to His Excellency Ahmed Abdel-Latif, Ambassador from the Peace Building Council in Egypt. Your Excellency. First, how do you perceive sustainable reconstruction in light of all the previous interventions? Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Your Excellency. Well, unfortunately, reconstruction has always been a priority for the international community. The point was to actually settle conflicts through negotiations and then reach peace agreements. This has always been the case for so many years. But recently, the international community realized that this is not enough to have sustainable peace. This is the first point that I would like to focus on, that reconstruction should be a priority in regional and international work. And actually, Egypt pioneered this in order to make reconstruction a priority. In the UN, Egypt presides over the committees for post-conflict countries, and His Excellency, the President, heads the Reconstruction Committee in the AU, and last month Egypt launched the African Reconstruction Center, headquartered in Cairo, that will lead to a qualitative leap in this area by transferring knowledge and exchanging experience in this field. When Egypt headed the African Union, His Excellency the President launched the Arab-African Forum, which was also part of its endeavors was to actually build peace and to have reconstruction works. And so Egypt plays a regional and international role in this regard. We also can see the support given by Egypt to our sisterly African and Arab countries in regards to infrastructure. In Gaza, $500 million have been pumped there, and also the same applies to Iraq, South Sudan. So these are all tangible forms of support for countries emerging from conflict. Also, different entities of the Egyptian state help with the training of the youth of these countries, because the Egyptian experience includes building infrastructure, empowering women and youth, development. So it's actually an integrated kind of experience that we would like to share with other countries. Another point has to do with financing. Financing and funding is not enough for the needs of these countries, and this is a priority for Egypt to support the finance of peace building. Of course, the UN financing is based on voluntary contributions, but this is not enough. We saw that during the pandemic. We can actually see how these forms of funding could be pooled and hence invested in order to be able to counter crises. The same could be applied to all conflict-related issues. So what about peaceful settlement efforts? Unfortunately, well, actually, we see that in many countries a peace agreement is reached. However, this does not end tension and violence. So reconstruction plans should be long-term in order to be able to counter these challenges. Finally, it's very important to tackle capacity building. His Excellency, the President said that building human resources is very important. Human beings are key. Financial resources are not enough without having human resources that are trained to carry out reconstruction projects and with a vision. So regarding recommendations, I think that in our Arab region, we have a limited scope of training programs, especially for youth in the field of peace and reconstruction. And the Cairo Center actually offers a training course with this theme in its center. And as we said, youth are the most affected group by this conflict, and we need to be able to counter them henceforth. Thank you, Your Excellency, the head of Cairo Center for Peace Building and Conflict Settlement. From UN officer.
Forum 2022. It is a pleasure to join you for today's panel discussion on the international responsibility for post-conflict reconstruction. The United Nations Peace Building Support Office, of which I am the deputy head, helps to build and sustain peace by fostering international support for nationally owned and led peace building efforts. In doing so, we champion the implementation of the Youth, Peace and Security Agenda. The 2015 UN Security Council Resolution 2250 on youth, peace and security fundamentally changed the way young people are recognized in the international peace and security platforms. I will make 3 points in the context of today's discussion that relate to different aspects of this important agenda. First, youth participation undoubtedly increases the legitimacy and sustainability of peace and post-conflict reconstruction processes. Peace processes that are inclusive from the analysis and designing phase increase the likelihood of achieving sustainable peace. Relevant authorities must pay particular attention to ensure the equal participation of marginalized youth groups with less access to formal political processes. The proximity of young people to the table is not just an add-on. It matters because young people are distinctively and for long periods impacted by the decisions made throughout the peace-building processes. Moreover, young people demonstrated time and again their capacity to shape and sustain peace-building processes through formal and informal platforms. After all, young people are not only the leaders of tomorrow, but also the leaders of today. They can lead or actively support reconstruction processes in their role as grassroots community leaders, young parliamentarians, activists working towards positive social change, amongst many others. Second, addressing the post-conflict needs of youth is critical not only to ensure stabilization, but also sustainable and peaceful development. The needs of youth in terms of jobs and services and rights are to be taken into account. A particular focus is needed on reskilling and upskilling youth and connecting them from learning to employment and entrepreneurial opportunities. The availability of decent jobs and education for youth is tied to the sustainability of their futures and their positive contribution in peaceful societies. Third, in post-conflict settings, young people face numerous challenges that have a lasting impact on their mental health, requiring the integration of mental health and psychosocial support, or MHPSS, into peace-building practice. And this is why MHPSS has been made one of the focus areas of the Peace Building Fund's Gender and Youth Promotion Initiative. So to conclude, the international community has a responsibility to strive towards youth-inclusive peace initiatives across the entire peace-building spectrum. Multi-stakeholder national coalitions on youth, peace, and security should be established and engage in planning and decision-making on peace-building, post-conflict reconstruction, as well as in discussions on resource allocations. Youth must also be supported through capacity-building opportunities to take an active part in reconstruction efforts. We need to ensure that decisions about investments in infrastructure, education, and job creation take into account youth voices and needs, especially in the context of post-conflict reconstruction, where we need to strengthen social cohesion, foster reconciliation across generations. Thank you for your engagement and commitment, and I wish you all, the participants, an enlightening forum.
The Secretary and the Officer of UN Peacekeeping and Peacebuilding Office. For the recorded image now, we will give the floor to His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. Thank you very much. In the name of Allah, we have been addressing this issue in the previous youth forum, especially in 2018. We have addressed the standing conflicts and the reconstruction, the issues and challenges witnessed by countries undergoing conflicts and its impact on the younger generations, even the children living in the camps or in the states, if we may say. For us to be capable of moving, the conflicts must stop. Not only us, but rather the whole world, let it be the United Nations, the European Union, or even the civil society organization who are eager to participate. Conflicts must stop. Before that, it would be more difficult. Technically speaking, on the ground, when a peacekeeping or peace building or reconstruction action starts, it wouldn't be carried out at the best or optimal image as we wish. I'm not here speaking about Yemen, but rather I'm speaking generally. If an opportunity comes for the conflict to stop, opportunity shall come for the construction. Funds will be available, will shall be there. Everybody will be eager to participate for this thing to be done. Yet, a priority of action is, before mentioning numbers and figures, there is a difference between alleviating the impacts of a crisis by providing food, providing housing, providing aids and medications, and on the other hand, rebuilds a state coming out of a conflict. What we are trying to do now is to mitigate the outcomes of a conflict. This is a phase that comes before the end of the war. Then comes the reconstruction. Reconstruction costs not only money, as you said. All what you have said is extremely important, of course, but what is needed is not only money. How about the humanitarian aspect, the psychological aspect, the social aspect, the impacts of such aspects? A crisis that lasted for 7 years, how can we address the impacts at all levels? I believe that out of this forum we need to call countries which are undergoing conflicts on the name of the forum and the youth here and the world youth who aspire for peace, prosperity and stability. We call for the leaders who are responsible for considering the situation in a different way that might lead to a settlement. We need to alleviate the magnitude of the hardships and challenges that are the outcomes of the war. As for Yemen, here in Egypt, we are prepared and willing with all the brothers and sisters and with all the partners to help out of our belief that peace, building and prosperity, as we believe here in Egypt, we never intervene in the internal affairs of the states, and we call for no interventions whatsoever. We need to find a solution by ourselves, away from conflicts, away from wars. Let me get back to my invitation and call on behalf of the world youth. And I hope that through the communication devices and social connections to send their messages to their respective countries. Please send your messages to your friends, to your countries, to your beloved ones back in your countries. Call with us. You have to appreciate our call. You have to appreciate our message so it could be heard by those who are responsible for the conflicts. Our dear son here from Yemen is speaking about the National Academy. Every single entity here in Egypt is available for everybody to help building capacities. I'm not speaking out of diplomacy. This is a belief. This is a policy. We are here, as we always say in Egypt, that we are willing to help in the reconstruction and in peace building. Devastation and destruction will only lead to pain and suffering for those who undergo the crisis, while building construction will push for hope, push for more dreams. We are here willing. The National Academy is willing and ready to receive the youth, not only from Yemen, from everywhere. Our dear brothers from all over the continent, from all over the Arab countries, they send their citizens for the Academy to receive the necessary trainings. As for Gaza Strip, yes, indeed, Gaza Strip need rather more figure, bigger than $500 million. We wish we could contribute with larger numbers. What I would tell the people who are responsible for the second phase that started in last November, we urge you to employ citizens from Gaza, and please finalize the phases as promised as soon as possible for our brothers and sisters in Gaza Strip to enjoy the outcomes of this phase. We will keep calling for the donors not to give up on UNRWA, for the mandate of UNRWA to be fulfilled. The mandate of UNRWA needs to bounce back after the halt over the past years. And this is our call for the donors, and Egypt will be moving along with them. We have to resume bigger support for UNRWA so they can return to perform their role in Gaza. I'm not going to be lengthy, yet I believe that it's much better for the conflict not to start, for the problem not to commence. 2 or 3 years ago, a young man from a country asked me about my opinion. How can we change the situation? Should we change what we have, our fait accompli, by force, or should we wait? I told him, please be patient if you want my opinion, because changing by force could lead to destruction that would go beyond control. Changing by force would lead to devastation that would go under control, beyond control. Yet, patience will be better for the future. I'm telling all the followers, our area, our region paid high prices for the interventions in the international affairs. I am repeating this again and again. There have been attempts for change. The owners of such attempts didn't know that this would lead to the current status of devastation. Egypt would have witnessed the same destiny. I'm repeating this again and again for the people of Egypt to know and to remember that Allah Almighty favored us and saved us this dark destiny. A state of 100 million survived being a state of refugees, a state of conflicts. waiting for people to watch and donors to give. Donors waiting for donors to give. Please remember this. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, President of the Arab Republic of Egypt. Thank you for all the panelists. Thank you. See you again.